Here are the delegate methods. Well, here's just a list of what you get back from delegate methods. Again, very similar to AV Audio Player. You'll be told when the recording is done. You'll be told of any audio encode errors, right? Encode errors rather than decode errors. And there's hooks for handling interruptions. The last way of doing audio recording here is with, again, it's actually the audio queue APIs through Audio Toolbox. And you can actually tell your audio queue to get set up as an input queue. And what will happen then, instead of feeding the queue buffers, it will feed you buffers of audio, filled with whatever came in from the microphone. So you create a queue, you define the callback function that you want to call whenever it receives data. You start the queue, and that'll start recording. And then it's up to you, actually, with these APIs to do the storing onto disk. So if you want to, you actually don't have to store it to disk immediately if you want to process that. If you want to do the T-Pain app, you may want to take these buffers and feed them back into an audio unit graph that'll do the auto-tune or whatever. Don't do auto-tune, it's been done. Find some other effect and do that. If you want to, actually, there's a great example, which is the Speak Here example on Apple's developer site. So go check those. OK, so this is where I want to talk a little bit about how do you get iPod playback. Yeah?
One question. So how do you know how much space you have for storing your audio? Is there a limitation on the amount of space that an application gets?
That's a good question. Josh, do you know? Is there a limit to how much space your application can use for storage? And do you know when you're approaching that? Yeah. Not sure. I would bet I don't know the answer. But I think you may be able to find that out through the NS File Manager to find out how much space is left. I'm not sure, actually.
So in this case, you basically just give a URL within your application and
right.
file gets stored there.
Right. So the question is, well, where do you store that data? And as an application, you have access to a few different places to store. Right? You're mostly locked in. We talked about the sandbox a little while ago. You're mostly locked into a few locations in your application, right? So every application actually gets its own user hierarchy. It gets a documents folder, it gets a cache folder, it even gets its own temp folder. And you can write to those areas. It gets a library folder as well. So if you're familiar with those folders and how things are stored on the Mac OS, it's very, very similar to that. But it's all within your application. So if let's say you're recording, that actually also means that you can't record something and have another application use that recording, right? So you're limited that way. But any other questions about recording or playback? Okay. So the media player APIs, media player framework. This is how you get the iPod to play back music. So you have access to the entire iPod music library. Audiobooks, music, podcasts. I think those are the three types. And you have access to play back those items. You don't have access to get the data for those items. And if you think, part of the restrictions here is that some of that music may be DRM'd. Now, sure, Apple got rid of DRM middle of last year, but some of that data is not accessible. And of course, they don't want applications going and ripping files. So you have access to the library insofar as you can tell the iPod application to play it for you. And as we talked about with the audio session categories, the iPod can play in the background for your app. So if you're building that music player app, the piano player app where you're going to play on top of it, you can have the user in your application go and pick a song, and then you can generate your sounds on top of it. There are a couple different ways to get to this. One is through a very simple view. I think it's a view controller, the MP Media Picker controller, which you would pop up as, say, a modal view, and that will actually automatically be configured to have the user's library there for you, and then when the user picks one or more songs, it'll call you back, and you can do whatever you want with those. If you want deeper access, let's say you wanted to build your own application that does custom filtering of the iPod app. I know there's actually a former student of this class built an app that basically it was an iPod app, but only for albums, only for music that you had entire albums for. So kind of interesting. Or I think it was maybe 5 tracks or more per album. And they didn't show you any tracks that had fewer than 5 tracks for that album, if that makes any sense. The way you would do that is through the query API. So the media player framework gives you ways to query the database. Here's the MP Media Picker controller first. So you can initialize it with, here are the different media types you can use: music, podcast, audiobooks. And I'm pretty sure this is a UI view controller. You can actually get that and put it present it modally, right? As we talked about, either you can put it in a navigation controller, or you can just say modal view controller, present, something like that. You can specify whether you want it to allow the user to pick multiple items. And if you say no, then the first thing they pick is going to close it, and you get a callback. If they say yes, then they can choose several items, and it may have check marks or something next to it. And you can also provide a prompt. So actually, this must already be embedded in a modal view controller, but you can allow it to prompt in the nav controller. And the delegate methods, well, you can know when the user hit cancel, and you can know what they picked if they actually successfully went through. And what it actually returns is an MP media item collection, which we'll see in a moment. In fact, we'll see right now. A MP media item collection is a set, it's an array of MP media items. Okay? MP media items are tracks, we'll look at that in a second. But MP media item collection is actually also used to represent playlists. So you can ask the library for playlists, and that's a bunch of MP media item collections. You can ask it for albums, and that's a collection. And here are some properties on it. So you can get a collection, and you can get the items off of that, and it'll return you an array. You can ask for the count. You can ask for something called the representative item. And if you have, let's say you get a playlist that's a Genius playlist, the representative item would be the song that was used to create that Genius playlist. If you had any other kinds of collections, I think for an album it might return the first item. For a playlist it might return the first item. But there's some smarts in there to know what is the MP media item that represents this collection. And MP media item collection, because it's an array of types of MP media items, may have one or more types, so it'll return this enum to you. It's actually a bit field mask. An MP media item, well, this is it's a property-based. There are only 2 method calls on it. One is can filter by property, so you can ask it, are you able to filter by artist? And then you can also say, you can get, I think so there's can filter by property, and then there's value for property. So there are several strings you can use. You could say value for property, MP media item type artist, MP media item type title. There's several lyrics, right? You can get the lyrics off of a song. Yes?
Is that metadata just gettable, or can you also set it?
I believe, so the question is that gettable or settable, and I think it's just gettable. So you don't I don't think there's any write access to the iPod library. I think it's up to the user to write that through iTunes. So, yeah. All right, so here are different classes that are available in the media player framework. There's the MP media library, which represents your entire library. There's the query, the predicate, and the property predicate, which allows you to, you can build predicates and then query for that. So if you want all Lady Gaga songs that are greater than 3 minutes, you can build that. In fact, maybe you can query the lyrics for, anyway. And then MP media item artwork, you can get the artwork from a media item as well. All right, so that's it for audio. I'm going to move on to video now, unless there's any questions before I do.